What is up, everybody, and welcome to Average People Talking. I saw my homie Liam was in the chat. Thanks for joining me, buddy. Hope you guys are well. Hope you're having a lovely evening. I've got a very interesting topic for you all tonight. I think this is my favorite stream beat. We're going to talk about spirituality. And what do I think about it? What do I know about it? What is it? What is it not? And all that good stuff. And as is common for my show, it was prompted by a back and forth that I had that really made me want to address this particular topic. And that back and forth took place on the good old Book of Faces. The post has since been removed by the individual who posted it. But let me, at least just for context, before we jump into it, I want to talk about my intent. Because that was I was dealt with in bad faith in this exchange on Facebook by multiple parties. And that really frustrates me. So let me make my intent clear. My goal in every conversation, which is what this show is about, is having a better human conversation, is to make the world and every individual within it better. A better place to live means consciousness improving and awareness being raised, and humans dealing with each other in better and more cooperative ways. And the reason I believe that is we're fundamentally in conflict as a species against a hostile world. A hostile world with scant and scarce resources, which we're badly mismanaging. I mean, all these different things. And there's really only two ways out of that conflict. We can continue to have good human conversation and cooperation, and fix it that way, or the other end is violence. And I think we've all seen enough of that playing out right now in the world. So that's why I'm going to avoid it. Part of the reason I feel that way is I'm confident that good faith disagreements, where two people are presenting information for the sake of increasing both of their knowledge, they lead to revelation of truth. And I mean objective truths that can be known independent of human opinion, something that can be, understood really in a rational way that's available to every rational thinker, which we're not always, and that is fair, but that is where truth lies. That is really the motive. The motive is to seek truth. And I'm going to talk about a lot of that tonight. But I wanted to get that stated off the jump. There is no other motive. I was accused of a lot of different things in bad faith in regards to this particular conversation. That was simply just not the case. So now that I've got that on the table and out of the way, let me share what the actual post is with you. So, harmless enough tweet, right? Somebody shared a tweet that said, "Can't believe people still label spirituality, tarot, etc. as being evil. Spirituality saved me from depression, helped me let go of a toxic relationship, and made me love myself and life more than ever. So if believing in it and practicing it makes me, quote, evil, then I'll be that," with a shrug face and a crying emoji. Now, on its face, fairly nominal, non-threatening tweet. But the problem is people can say this about religions that I can demonstrate to be false. And that might be true for that one individual subjective experience. But with another person's subjective experience, they can take and twist a religion, a belief, whatever, and actually do very, very harmful things with it. I mean, if somebody made that same excuse to justify their belief in jihad, you wouldn't accept it. Oh, I can't believe you still labeled jihad evil. It saved me from depression, helped me let go of a toxic relationship, helped me love myself and life more than ever. So if believing in it and practicing jihad makes me evil, well, then I'll be that. You could put that same thing in that sentence and it wouldn't make any sense as a justification for anything, which is why I really dislike messages of this kind. Now, what I thought was a fairly respectful and kind disagreement was what I commented on there, which was, hey, as an atheist, I don't find it evil by any means. Of course that's ridiculous. I do find harboring beliefs that are not justified by logical argument, evidence, and justifications to be dangerous to one's grasp on reality, however. I felt that was as minimally invasive as opposed as possible. Now, it was immediately met by a reply by one friend that basically was like, oh, you figured out that magic isn't real and the most profound thing. I'm certain we've all encountered basic logic by now. And I replied to him and said, as you can see from post below, clearly not. And then he went on to defend it and saying, well, they're not hurting anybody. Okay, fair enough. Like, they could be potentially hurting themselves, but I guess we just let people do that, and that's good friendship? I don't understand. What was frustrating is it is a profound thing to not engage in magical thinking. It is a profound thing to not believe any false truths. It is a profound thing to engage with reality as much as possible. And it's a profoundly good thing because I think in a hierarchy of values, we put truth above all. I would really like to meet this person that wants to believe things that can be demonstrated to not be true and thinks that that's okay. Like everybody has those sacred or close to the vest beliefs that they don't want to be challenged. And the reason they don't want them to be challenged is because there's some other value that they have that belief is going towards, helping, whatever. And they don't want that to turn around and get challenged because they're afraid of the consequences of that. The trouble becomes, where do you place truth as in your value hierarchy? Because for me, it's number one. For me, nothing more important than knowing what's true. That's how I keep my grips on reality. That's how I'm incapable of any kind of discussions at all. Like, that's really, for me, that value reigns supreme. And I feel like there's this weird thing that happens in portions of the left where it's like, maybe that's not the most important value. Maybe that's not worth debating and fighting over and arguing over. And that's where I think I diverge with some of these people. But that, again, goes back to my intent. My intent is to reveal truth and experience as much truth as I can personally and help others do the same. Because I feel like that is the most important value we should be looking for. So where do we actually get into the weeds on this? Well, another friend commented on it, making a comment, and I'm going to kind of summarize the point here. But more or less their point was, there are some things that you just can't rationalize with logic. We can't comprehend the vastness of the universe and all of its secrets. Our brains weren't designed for that. Hey, Caitlin, thanks for you and Devin joining. I appreciate it. In YouTube chat. Awesome. Glad to have you on the show. So here's the thing with that comment right there that I immediately had trouble with is if something cannot be rationalized with logic, if you can't explain it, well, then you don't know anything about it. My issue is when you claim to know things about things that can't be rationalized. And so that initial comment isn't really the problem, right? You're right. There are some things that we can't comprehend. There are secrets of the universe that we may never understand. There are some things that we can't explain. Full stop. End of sentence. You don't have to take another step. Anything you do take another step on, if you believe it, then it's got to be false belief. You can't know anything about it. You can't know what's true and what's not if it can't be explained logically. Rationality is the only game in town for that. So that's what I said, more or less. Like, respectfully, if you can't explain it with logic, then anything you believe about it is false belief. And then I went on to say this, and this is what I mean by bad faith, just so you understand. I said, let me also be clear, I'm a spiritual person. I meditate daily. I understand the value in exploring spirituality, but I think you can do that without believing in any bullshit. And that's really important. The response I got was, you can't apply logic to everything because we're not capable of understanding everything. And then this individual went on that they're trying to tap into their psychic abilities through meditation. And mentioned that they're receiving messages in their dreams. Okay, once again, we've reached a point where it's like you've taken the step over the line that you can logically and apply logic to everything we can know. And if you can't apply logic, then we can't know anything about it. And we're not going to understand it, and that's okay. It's okay to not know things. That's the big difference, I think, between me and a lot of people. I'm fine not knowing. The answer I don't know is not unsatisfying to me. It means we've got to do more work to know this. But I'm not going to claim to know things that I can't know or don't know. And I tried to make that difference clear in this conversation. That did not go well. I kept trying to explain this further. And I went on to explain kind of my spiritual experiences growing up to try and explain this. And once again, I got dealt with in bad faith. So let me pause here for a moment. One of the things that Sam Harris says is, hey, what reason could you give somebody who doesn't value reason so that they should value reason? What logic can you use to explain to someone who doesn't value logic that they should value logic? Well, what you can do is appeal to the higher value. And that higher value is what's true. The higher value is what's true. That's what I appeal to. And if you want to know what's true, I can demonstrate to you that logic and reason are the best methods that we have for obtaining truth. And in fact, they're the only methods we have for truly gaining human knowledge. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is merely guessing and probabilities and wishful thinking a lot of times. And so you have to understand that that's the only way we can know things is if they can be justified, if they can be argued for. The definition of knowledge is justified true beliefs. That means it's not good enough that the belief is true. You have to be able to back that up as well. And that's the only thing I was trying to do in this point with this conversation. So to do so, to appeal to that higher value of truth, I explained a time where I was just as confused about this until logic and reason came into play. So that for me is, I grew up as a preacher's kid and a kid preacher. I was experiencing some really incredible spiritual experiences in long worship services, long prayer meetings, where I would just sit there and feel total body euphoria, like I was connected to something but really beyond myself. And I didn't understand, or what I believed at the time was that was the power of God. And oh my gosh, look at the way God's making me feel. because I'm doing this great work. And then I would chase that feeling. I mean, I would go to church camps, and I would go to, different types. I was going to church at one point 4 times a week, continuing to chase that experience. And I would sometimes spend more and more time in prayer trying to gain that experience. And really the only reason why, at the time, I would have said a very, very similar defense, right? Like regarding this situation, I would have said something to the effect of, hey, well, my beliefs are my beliefs. They're sacred. You're not allowed to criticize them. How are you going to tell me what I experience isn't real? This is all my reality, and the fact that you don't see the truth is your fault, because clearly I'm experiencing it. And yet, not that long later, a mere couple years as my understanding grew, I would really reimagine all of those experiences and see all of those experiences. I was having a spiritual experience, a meditative experience, but all of that nested within something that can be understood. It's simply consciousness and its contents. There wasn't any special thing there. There wasn't a big man upstairs on the other end of the phone causing me to feel all of those things. It was just pure experience. Now, what I learned through meditation later in life is that pure experience I was feeling was experience absent my ego. And I don't mean like my inflated sense of self-worth. I mean like me was not present in those moments. That oneness that some people, joke about in the movies of, oneness with everything when you're meditating. That feeling of unity is actually not really a feeling of unity at all. That's a poor use of the English language. It's a feeling of there being no barrier to the universe. The voice inside your head that sounds a little bit like you, that pumps thoughts into your brain second after second after second after second, isn't you. Everything is you, and you are everything. There is just consciousness. There's just experience, and you can get to that point in a meditative state relatively quickly if you're practiced. And what I didn't realize is that all those times in church, growing up, all those little moments, that's what I was doing. I was actually getting really good at a mindfulness type of meditation practice while I was thinking I was talking to the big man upstairs. And so pointing out that and realizing that I was wrong, I really thought would at least make a dent in this conversation. And I want to talk about this good faith versus bad faith problem now. Because let's say I told you that story right now. You're hearing it and you're sitting there in chat. And I just explained to you, right? Like, hey, here's a situation where I believe something. And then I was the most unbelievable feeling and experience. No one could have convinced me what I was experiencing wasn't God himself. And then yet a few years later, I completely realized I had false beliefs. Somebody who wants to operate rationally, somebody who wants to operate in good faith and actually values truth would hear that and say, okay, good point. Maybe I haven't explored if these beliefs that I have are falsifiable. Maybe I haven't explored if there is something about what I currently believe that's not true. But instead, what happens? People have protection over a certain class of ideas and beliefs that they're very protective of, and you're not allowed to question them, and you're not allowed to... Well, that's not good. Because let's look at how that can cause mass issues, right? If that's true and we're not allowed to challenge some of these deeply sacred beliefs, and we can't ever get out of that, we can't appeal to their desire for truth, we can't appeal to something else, and you're not open to counter evidence and rational arguments against what you currently believe, if you can't be open-minded on that level, what could you be convinced of tomorrow that you won't let go of? And how harmful might it be to you or somebody else? This is part of why the genital mutilation community is almost exclusively religious. It's a terrible practice. And it's a terrible practice on girls. We all know that. And it's really condemned in a lot of places. But really, we've been allowing it for far too long on boys as well as circumcision. And we pretend that that's normal. And the only reason why we do is because the particular religion that favors it is much stronger in Western culture and has a larger presence and has protected themselves from criticism for far longer. In both cases, it's a terrible thing to do. It's terrible. And we shouldn't do it. And yet, if you bring it up, will you be met with somebody who's open to evidence and counterpoints and reasons why they shouldn't, do circumcision? Of course not. That's not going to be the response. The response is going to be, fuck you. That's my opinion. That's my prized belief. Don't mess with it. That is problematic on every level. Because if you can put as heinous as of an act like mutilating the genitals of babies in that box, what else are you willing, under the right circumstances, with enough people watching, with enough people who subscribe to it, what else are you willing to excuse on a bad belief? And again, it can be demonstrated that those things are not necessary to do. They're based on a belief in a supernatural being for whom no evidence exists, no rational argument's ever been put forward that justifies the existence of this person, this God, right? And then people say, well, because of that, they get the right to do really terrible things. This is the kind of connection to truth that if someone really does value truth, we have to be able to appeal to that to get them out of that cycle. And so what we have to do is find ways to explain why reason, why logic are better tools for getting at truth. And I failed in this conversation in particular, partly because I started later in. It turned out that these people didn't value logic and reason and arguments because they just wanted to protect their special beliefs. Now, the bad faith gets worse. The one particular individual that was involved in this exchange on Facebook came at me and told me not to use this on my podcast, which I reminded them that they have no ability to prevent me from doing so. It's my free speech, and I can talk about whatever the hell I want. I made it clear that I was not going to reveal anyone's identities. And then I was accused of doing this. The only reason why I was even posting this was for self-edification. That was one reason. Was to plug my podcast and grow my podcast. I have like 6 or 7 people that watch it with any regularity, and all around about 150 total subscribers between 3 platforms. I really don't think shamelessly growing my podcast is my goal, right? My goal was truth. And I stated multiple times, my goal was truth. And this person literally said, I don't think you have good intentions. And so I asked them, like, hey, all right, you're dealing with me in bad faith. You're telling me that my intentions that I'm stating are not actually my intentions. You have something else in mind. Tell me why. And they said, well, you went there first. How is it not bad faith or unkind for you to go around basically saying anyone who doesn't believe as you do is harming themselves and others? And I said, that's not what I said. They said, quoting me on the post, these practices can harm people. And I said, that is the least charitable interpretation of what I said imaginable. And they said, literally you word for word. Without context, that is what I said, but it's not the context in which I intended my message. And this person tripled down on this, Because I asked them, I was like, do you think that some beliefs aren't harmful? Like, do you not see the problem where some beliefs can be harmful? Which, again, is one of those questions to try and get somebody to realize there's a truth principle at work that matters. We all know some beliefs can be harmful. I've mentioned a couple here. I think we can all think of times like, cult leaders that killed themselves over a false belief and be mortified by that, right? Same kind of idea. And they went on to say, well, I didn't say that some beliefs aren't harmful. Clearly some are, but just saying things are inherently deceptive or harmful just because they're different is not okay. And that's what you were saying. Because it's not based on science or truth. And I went on, and then they said you can follow logic as you understand it, and that's fine. But it's not for you to not okay for you to say that logic is one size fits all. Now, herein lies the fundamental disagreement. I can say absolutely that logic is one size fits all, because logic is how we figure out correct reasoning, good arguments, how we discover truth. If there's another method to finding truth, to understanding language, like what is it? Logic is the basis for people to understand the world around them. Like, the different systems that we have of logic beyond properly basic beliefs are the only way we get past properly basic beliefs towards higher order understanding of anything. It's the only place where truth can be known, insofar as we understand that our first-hand experience is often mistaken. Our first-hand experience is often not trustable. And you can go off of a million examples of why first-person experience is not reliable, but how often do we experience things and then not realize that and not realize until later that what we were experiencing was actually something not like that at all. And here's the thing, too. There's so many facts and context about an experience that can really, really change your belief and view on it. And only somebody with a really well-crafted meditation and spiritual practice can understand this very well. So one example I could give you is... this one's been used before. Just imagine for a moment, you wake up in the middle of the night, and for reasons you can't understand, your heart is racing. You can literally feel your blood pumping through your vein in your neck. You're gasping for air, and your body is physically in pain, like your muscles are physically in pain. And you had no reason to expect this. You weren't even having like a nightmare where you were running away from something. Like, this just happens to you out of nowhere. And then it persists for like 10, 12, 14 minutes, right? Something ridiculous. At that point, your perspective is, I'm having a medical emergency. There's something wrong with me. And that could seem that that's true, that there is something wrong with you. Well, the context of the situation can change very simply to where that's the best thing ever. And that's exactly what you expect. What if you had just completed a 25-minute run on the treadmill? Your muscles are tired from being really, truly damaged from the amount of exercise you just put in. Your blood is pumping through that vein in your neck, and you can feel it. Your heart's beating out of your chest. You can't catch your breath even after a couple minutes. And yet you're not having a medical emergency. There's a rational explanation to this that you can understand. And the truth is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. There's an explanation for the cause of this, right? first-person experience is constantly clouded by our thinking, constantly clouded by the way we intuit and observe the universe. It constantly wrong. First-hand experience is wrong all the time. We perceive and interpret messages where there are no messages. We have magical thinking. And why do we have this? Well, we got magical thinking because there was an evolutionary advantage to it. Right? For example, if you are one of our ancient ancestors on the plains of Africa, and you hear a rustling in the grass, and you think to yourself, that must be a predator. And you immediately prepare to defend yourself, hide, run, whatever, because you believed that was a predator, and it turns out it's just the wind. Congratulations. Evolution has saved you from the enemy that was not there. Your genes will be passed down to your progeny. Now, the flip side to that is, if you're the reverse, if you don't have the wishful thinking, if you're the person who believes, oh, that rustling in the grass, I hear it, it's probably just the wind, and it turns out it's the predator, well, then the predator kills you, and congratulations, you just got a Darwin Award. You have died before you had the chance to pass your genes on. So evolution baked magical thinking into us. We're stuck with it. The only method I know for overcoming it is rational argument, is reason, is logic, and the appeal to truth. That's where the secret sauce is. That is what you have to appeal to get out of this. So, if you actually understood all of what I just said, the answer this person had, rather than unfriending me, removing what I said, should have been, right? And this is really the climax of the whole conversation. If what I said was so offensive, if what I said was so beyond the pale, because they're so right, shouldn't they be able to just simply defend why they believe what they believe? Would it be so hard? Well, look, I believe it, but you can't rationally understand it because it's beyond us, but it's totally true. Yeah, sorry, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. And the truth is, you're convinced on bad reasons. If that's how you feel, you've been convinced of a false truth. And if you can't justify it or defend it, and my challenging of it offends you, well, so fucking what? That's nothing more than a whine. I'm offended is not an argument. I'm offended is not anything. It's just you saying stuff to avoid confronting the fact that I've brought up evidence why what you said might not be true, and you don't want to hear it. Now, here's another illusion that happened later in the conversation. This person said they're not interested in being proselytized to by anyone, whether it be Christians or so-called logical people. And then they went on to say you're not dealing in good faith because you're more interested in being right than being a genuine person. Okay, now we once again have a perversion and a confusion of the issue. This has nothing to do with me being right. I could be wrong. But I at least know why I would be. And there's a method that I can give you called logic and argument and reason. There's a way to prove me wrong. Having something that's unfalsifiable, that can't be proved wrong, that you just get to have as your pet belief, doesn't make you genuine. It makes you a fanatic. It makes you a very irrational and crazy person. You wouldn't accept that about anything. If somebody came up to you tomorrow and said, don't criticize my belief. Genuinely, I believe that tomorrow morning when I wake up, I am going to transport myself to another dimension and marry a little green alien. And this person, in lieu of this great moment that's coming, this prophecy that they've had, starts selling all their possessions or giving them away. You would go to your friend and say, you're crazy. And what would you use to try and convince them that they're crazy? Logic and reason and good arguments, etc. Right? But this is the trick that bad pseudo-spirituality does. It convinces people that they have some special purchase on knowledge that exists beyond themselves. Things they don't know and things that they can't know. And this is not spirituality. This is not spirituality. It is just a priori faith. It is false belief. It is the same type of religious thinking that has gotten us wars since the dawn of time, and violence, and why we came from people who used to bury their own children in post holes as to not incur the wrath of a god. These are the sorts of people that we evolved from. And if we don't get out of thinking like this, even if you do think you're progressive, even if you do think you're nominally on the left, or whatever, if we don't move ourselves away from this kind of bad thinking and bad logic, we are doomed. We're doomed. And it's everywhere. And this is the reason why people don't know what to think regarding vaccines. This is why people don't know what to think regarding the philosophy of nonviolence and de-escalation, and what would be the best. I mean, there are some people who are, I mean, genuinely, I feel like, given the current situation, horny for nuclear war. And they don't even realize what they're saying. They're like, oh, well, Russia bad, so we should do a no-fly zone. And it's like, no, if we do that, it's pretty much World War III between two nuclear-armed countries, and I'm not down for that, yo. We're going to have to find a way to talk this out, not escalate it. And these people who are defending that, this is all because, once again, it's this idea that nobody else can tell me what to think. Nobody else can ever... Stop that. Yes, of course other people can tell you what to think if you know how to think. The problem is how you think. We need to be teaching reason and logic and good argument and evidence and how to actually think critically way sooner in schools, because people get to adulthood carrying this I don't have to be rational baggage, and then they defend all kinds of nonsense. And then they use bad assumptions because they want to avoid dealing with the negative thing that they think that badly. Like, this is all an avoidance. And this is actually what's funny about my spiritual experience that I wanted to share for the last little bit of the show. The whole thing about this is all because our egos are so strong, and they constantly feed thoughts into our head. I must be right. This value, this truth, this belief that I hold is too important to me. And so something else must be at play here. Someone's got to have bad intentions. This is really, they don't actually genuinely disagree because they know I'm right. They're just doing this to get likes on their podcast. Or something to the effect of they're doing this just for their own self-edification. Like, if you can believe all of that, well, then you can believe anything. You can believe anything. So, how can I say all this and still be a spiritual person myself? What's really crazy is mindfulness as opposed to most of its counterfeits. And when I say most of its counterfeits, let's look this up. I'm going to look this up while we're talking about it. But I think most, if you're still out there, by the way, say hi in chat. I feel like it's gone quiet on me. Most of the popular mindfulness apps, Headspace, Calm, what's another popular one? There's one that's like built into your Apple Watch. A lot of them are counterfeits. A lot of them are not the real spiritual experience that you can have. And I would say there are probably two apps that I think are better than most. One is Sam Harris's Waking Up, and another one is 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And the reason for that is any kind of mindfulness practice that promises you the world, that tells you, what's up, Caitlin? What's up, Devin? Any kind of mindfulness practice that tells you something like ridiculous, like it will cure all of your negative emotions, all of this, but without being honest about what it is, they're just there to sell you something. And that's really how I feel about Calm and Headspace. They're trying to take advantage of what everything else in our modern life is, which is give you that quick hit of dopamine and do something. Because the truth is, it feels pretty good to unplug for a second and just take a break from everything. That's very different than actually training your mind to be mindful. Because mindfulness actually isn't even really a method of meditation. It's more of a quality of the mind. It's the ability to actually focus your attention in ways that are useful and notice the difference of what unfocused, unmindful, random thinking does for you and what it's like to constantly be identified with your thoughts. This type of spiritual experience, this type of self-examination is to actually notice something very profound, which is that there is no self. There is no you. There is no man in the boat steering itself on the sea of consciousness. There is just the sea. There is just consciousness and its contents. And so that's something that none of these things are really going to point out to you. Because the bad news is this might take you a year or 5 days. It may take you the rest of your life. You may never figure this out. Training your mind to be mindful is like a daily exercise we should do, like the gym. And not all of us are going to turn into, bodybuilders. It's just worth doing because the thing's worth doing. It's because it's very easy to notice what your mind is like when you're not being mindful, when you're just being distracted by the next thought that it appears in consciousness. I mean, you're trying to pay attention to me. You're trying to pay attention to this podcast. But how easily do you become distracted? You're constantly thinking. There's a voice in your head. Haven't you noticed? At some point, it probably noticed, what's that B for on his shirt? Is that his kitchen? His bread's at a really weird angle on top of the fridge. Like, you're trying to pay attention, but you can't, because the next thought that shows up that you did not author, it seems to come out of nowhere, will just interrupt your thinking. And so what I didn't realize as a kid in my youth group and in my church was those times I was closing my eyes, experiencing deep prayer for 25, 30 minutes at a time. What I would do is I would try to not pay attention to any one particular thing at all, right? I would be sitting upright in a pew in a chair, like so, close my eyes, and just try to clear my mind, because I knew if I was distracted by my thinking, I wouldn't be able to hear God's voice. And that's what I didn't want. I really believed God was up there, and I wanted to be able to hear him. And so what I would do is every time I would get distracted, I would just pick something to focus on. And I didn't realize I was learning how to meditate. I didn't realize that until much later in life, until I heard other teachers explain meditation this way. And that's actually what the best thing is to do when you're starting meditation, is to just deal with your breath. It's just to deal with your breath. Hi, Liam. And so every single time you're getting distracted by a thought, and by the way, when you get good at this, you can do it with your eyes open. You can be mindful while you're driving in traffic, or listening to music, or at a concert, or playing video games. Like, it's really a quality of the mind. It's not just a style of meditation. But that's actually getting better at that is the superpower. You get to notice things that really are profoundly simple. Really profoundly simple. You get to notice how your ego is in the way of you experiencing contentment every minute. Every moment you can just experience being content. And that's what I didn't realize, is what made me feel so good in those church sermons was the fact that I wasn't distracted by all my own self-made suffering. Love it, Tyler. Thanks for stopping by. So here's what I mean by self-made suffering. When you're noticing things like the bread that's out the wrong angle and the B on my shirt, which is for the Boston Uprising, this is a Overwatch team, right? When you're getting distracted by things like that, you know what other little thoughts you get constantly distracted by? Maybe my girlfriend's starting to love me less. I haven't really heard from her all night. And maybe my friends don't like me very much because my social media hasn't buzzed in an hour. And maybe I'm actually really uncomfortable right now, and I'm bored, and this isn't fun. And maybe all these little moment-to-moment thoughts are a judgment, or it's a thought that appears in consciousness. And that when that thought appears, when it comes up, if you remain constantly identified with it, if it is not clear to you why you should be thinking it and what those goals are, because you haven't actually taken time to notice those thoughts, you just go with them whenever they show up, you're going to suffer because you can't live up to the next thought. You can't predict it. You can't be ready for it. And you will create goals with your thoughts that are actually unobtainable. And they will make you miserable, along with all kinds of other little suffering moments. And so what was happening to me in church is I had no goals. I showed up and I knew that this is where I was supposed to be. For the next hour, that's where I'm supposed to be. Well, what am I supposed to get out of it? I'm supposed to communicate and worship God. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try and talk to that guy by not thinking about anything else, by getting rid of and jettisoning all my other distracting thoughts. For example, sitting in church, like, what's the cute girl 3 rows back think of me? And, did I forget to do my laundry at home? And all those little distractions, I wanted to push them away so that I could be ready for that moment. And then what would happen was, as I got good at it, I was experiencing the most unbelievable physical bliss. It would be this point where it's like pure sensation is the only way that I can describe it. My whole body would feel so at ease and content and relaxed that I literally could be pushed over in that moment and wouldn't even take me out of it. I wouldn't care. I would feel the pain of hitting the ground, and I would just experience that pain as more experience without judgment, because the pain is actually doesn't last very long. You notice it very quickly, and then it actually fades. So much of our suffering, as I said, is self-made. It's because we continue to think and dwell upon the things that we think are painful, an expectation that there will be more pain. You're anticipating the next painful moment, and you don't have to do that anymore because you're no longer experiencing it. You can just be content with consciousness and its contents all around you, which is incredible. That's a superpower. And that's what spirituality really is. I'm not selling you on some psychic abilities. No one has psychic abilities. No one's ever been demonstrated to have that legitimately ever in history. And anyone who believes it simply does so from a point of ignorance, for a failure to properly inspect the information around that situation, right? Because upon further inspection, being a psychic makes no sense. It's not possible to be spiritual and predict the future and be in touch with something called the spirit realm, which nobody can come and explain to you any better, right? I might be wrong about everything that I've said tonight, but one thing's for sure that we all know intuitively is that we are conscious. We are aware. And the other superpower with mindfulness and my spiritual experiences, there is just this moment right now. The only reason why it feels like there's a future is because you have the ability to think in future context. All of that with goals in mind. It's kind of like sometimes we spell this out with language, but sometimes we actually do it with more like pictures and imagining what it's going to be like, right? Like if you imagine what your dinner is going to look like when it's finally cooked, you might not think in the English language term this is going to be delicious. But on some level, when you're picturing the delicious meal at the end of it and expecting that, you're like, oh, that is how my dinner is going to be delicious. Then what happens if all of a sudden the phone rings, you get distracted, you walk away, you burn dinner? Oh, it's terrible. I burned dinner and now my whole night is ruined because I was already stressed out from all this other stuff. Mindfulness cuts through all of that, and burning dinner is just the present moment, and it's beautiful. Because you'll never get it back, and there's nothing else like it, and there is no future beyond consciousness and its contents right now. You don't actually have to worry about that. And the only way that you can learn this is, number one, having good tools of reason and logic and evidence, and having an open mind to facts and values, and not thinking that you know more than everybody else, not being blinded by your ego, thinking that you're above all this. First of all, none of this is even my opinion. Like, this type of meditation practice has been around in the Eastern tradition for over 2,500 years. It's not even new. It's not even new. These insights have existed for a long, long time. So you have to be open-minded to all of that, and then you have to actually just practice it. And having a good guide helps, which is why I recommend getting one of the good apps and not one of the bad apps. I really do not know what these emojis mean, Liam, in Twitch chat, but go for it, dude. So, yeah, I mean, the final takeaway here is, if you get a good app like Waking Up or 10% Happier and you start practicing just your ability to pay attention, commit to it like a gym. Commit to it like a gym. The gym only works if you go 3 times a week for 25 or 45 minutes, depending on what your goals are, right? The gym for your mind, practicing mindfulness, studying what it's like to be you, having a deeper experience, only works if you commit to 15 minutes a day. If you commit to experiencing it every single day and practicing and learning how to get better. You don't get to always be profound. There's not enough time, right? Sometimes you just have to do things in life, and you can't sit there and you have to think certain things out. But in every time where you have to do that, you can experience much more content feeling right around the corner. And whatever ailment, whatever negative emotion you're feeling, you can instantly flip a switch and turn from that if you go to this gym for your mind every single day and learn it. That's where the superpower lies. That's to me what all of spirituality is trying to tell us, and it doesn't require any bullshit beliefs to get you there. I don't have to sell you on any nonsense. You literally just have to learn how to pay attention. And I think that that's pretty cool, and that's why I do it every day. And if I had these people on my Facebook conversation that actually wanted to deal in good faith, they would understand that my intent was to try and get them to realize that I'm not trying to throw out the baby in the bathwater of spirituality. I do think there's a baby there worth preserving. But tarot cards and psychics and astrology and all these other little things that people are doing for spirituality, it's impossible meat. It's fake. It's not the real deal. It's not the real insights. And the only appeal that I can make is try it and see what I mean. Give it a shot for like 2-3 weeks. Try it every night. Get an app. Practice. There's a free trial for Waking Up that's awesome. 10% Happier, I think, also has a free trial. You can bounce back and forth between the two. You can start noticing and doing these, like, starting things. You can set a timer. You can prepare yourself. And that is worth doing. I think the spiritual, self-examined process of life is, without question, the most important part of life. I thought that as a Christian, I just called that thing God. But that was the part I was trying to get people to. It's like, listen, if you could only believe as strong as me and you could only do all this, you could experience this like I did. And there are people that very much feel that way, and I understand where they're coming from. But you don't need any of that bullshit. You can get there in a mere few weeks if only you are willing to try something new and schedule it into your day and convince yourself that you're not going to have any excuses and make a habit and give it a chance. And as soon as you do so, you'll be one step closer to not being fooled by any of this other pseudo bullshit that pretends to give you something that it can't. That's why you can be spiritual without religion and without believing in any nonsense. Most of what I have told you has been my own personal experience, but if you don't want to take it from me and you need an expert to validate you, PhD neuroscientist Sam Harris wrote a book called Waking Up. And I think the subtitle is shooting from the hip here, but it's A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. And it explains his story. It's not unlike mine. It's a different context because he was never a Christian believer, but he understood the difference between blissful, experience that's just enjoyed in the present moment, and what it's like to be constantly distracted by your mind, which makes you suffer in ways that you cannot even realize until you pay attention to how your own mind is making you suffer. And thank you, Liam, for your defense of me as well. Liam said in Twitch chat, for those of you that are watching on other platforms, he was diagnosed with bipolar and now proceeds through life daily, unmedicated and content as possible, and said, can confirm Alex knows his shit. This is something him and I have been talking about for a couple years because it's so important to me. This is the reason why some people do get caught up in religion and church and different beliefs, especially when they're like trying to recover from something or dealing with mental health issues, because this is a tool that really helps with all of that. It's just that you don't need all the extra commitment and other bullshit that's a side concern. And that's really the whole point I wanted to come to. And there's certainly no such thing as psychics. I'm certain there's no such thing as ghosts. Astrology, you can throw all of that in the garbage bin and think clearly and rationally and just experience day-to-day life without any of that extra noise and without any of that extra nonsense, and be, as Dan Harris says, another meditation expert, 10% happier. With that, I want to thank you for all of you who joined me. Some new people tonight. Caitlin, Devin, thanks guys. Zach, thanks for dropping a hang loose. Appreciate you. Tyler, appreciate you. Liam, as always, thanks for stopping by the show. For all of you who are going to watch later on YouTube or Facebook or wherever I'm at, thanks as well. If you found this valuable tonight, as this was a special, really, I think, an important topic, and you know somebody who could benefit from it, share what you learned. Share what you learned. Full episodes go to YouTube every time. So with that, let me bring the beats back up. And thanks for joining me. Y'all have a great night. Liam doesn't want the show to end. I'm sorry, friend. It has to. It has to.